Welcome to everyone. Welcome to everyone here. It's a joy to see you. Welcome to Dorothy. It's so wonderful to have you back. Um, and one of the just I mention your name from time to time, so I'll share. But we've been getting such great participation, et cetera. And just looking towards the future, I've been saying, I kind of like this. It's a weekly thing where it's, you can put it on a schedule like that. But then plus there's Dorothy, who probably, does so much better advertising than anyone else could ever think of. Yeah. And speaking on that, let me just kind of announce, because I know sometimes questions aren't from home, aren't heard here, et cetera. Dorothy was just saying that, it just seems there are fewer and fewer community sources like newspapers, et cetera, where one can get the word out. One of the things which is useful are a number of really great environmental organizations which we have in our area. And I mention that just in case any of you are interested. So today I'm going to talk about raptors and birds of prey. I know the college usually over the course of a year will bring in a raptor rehabilitator and do a big raptor show, and people get to be up close and personal to hawks. But then so too do some of these environmental organizations. And so if that's something that you might be interested in, I know as part of the Audubon Society, we brought in a friend of mine who rehabilitates raptors last year. So it was a show that was open to the public and other organizations. So once again, there's all of these great environmental uh, um, organizations. So the Orange County Audubon, if you ever wanted to look at their website, they have presentations, they have field trips. I help produce a newsletter that goes out every month with updates on local wildlife. So if you wanted to join, they would certainly welcome you. The Bashakil helps organize that Nature Watch program, where over the spring and summer months, there are people with spotting scopes on the bald eagle nest, and passersby who've never gotten a chance to look at a bald eagle could get a chance to do that. So there's really great organizations. They do hikes, they do presentations. And so if you're interested in, maybe exploring, practicing some birding skills, or maybe seeing if there's, a raptor rehabilitation center, or, a presentation or something, by all means, these organizations would love to hear from you and would love, to see you in them. So birds of prey. Oh, all right. I love birds of prey. I'm sure many of us do. Raptor talks get, just, wonderful participation and attendance. That being said, um, as a biologist, is raptor a good word? It's not. Is eagle a good word? It's not. Is hawk a good word? Is vulture a good word? They're not. So if you ask, what's a raptor? I don't know. And my answer is different now than it would have been 3 years ago. And so these are such a great bunch of birds, but like a lot of the words I've just used, biologically speaking, they're not the best. Let me explain. Uh, what's a raptor? Well, when I was young, it's easy. The birds of prey. Right, the birds of prey, they've got the hooked beak, the sharp talons. They eat meat. They're a group. And by that, like, a biological group. So once upon a time, there was an ancestor of the raptors, and from this raptor have come the diverse birds of prey, the eagles, the hawks, the osprey, the falcons, the owls, the vultures, all of these things. They're all raptors. All right. Well, in the older days, we could compare them using physical features, and we could say, all right, well, they eat meat, they got a hooked beak and sharp claws, so I guess that counts for something. So we'll use these traits to kind of bunch them together. But ever since the 70s, you could say, ooh, let me compare their genes, because if what you're saying is correct and their family, then the genes of they should all share more genetic similarities with each other than they do with anything which is not in this raptor group. All right, so that's how we started. And then we realized, well, that's not true. So one of the big ones now, I was hoping to talk about these today. So if we're going to be a little arbitrary, and apparently we are, in how we organize these, who goes today versus who goes next week, Like, well, let's see how much time we have, and if we can fit this group in it, if we work them in next week, that's fine. But falcons, all right. So where do falcons fit in? Well, believe it or not, as of recently, just the past couple of years, all of the genetic evidence says they're not raptors. Right? They are not relatives of hawks or eagles, not even close. Like the other ones I'm going to mention, they're at least close. Falcons apparently aren't even close. If you were to name, just repeating, if you were to name who the closest relatives of falcons are, it's parrots and songbirds. All right. So as far as raptor, like they certainly share the features of they have sharp claws and and they eat meat. But then again, maybe they aren't good traits to use. There are songbirds that eat meat, like shrikes. They hunt other birds. They'll actually kind of mean. They actually like throw them into thorny trees where they like impale their prey and then they peck at them. But like crows and blue jays, like they'll go after small animals. House wrens, little tiny birds, will attack and sometimes even kill birds bigger than themselves as they compete for nesting cavities. So yes, birds of prey, they eat meat, they hunt, but that's not unique to that. And certainly there are lots of birds that fish or eat worms, and since they're predators. So I'm not sure that's a good trait to use for a familial comparison. And their DNA says these are not raptors. And so if we were to put birds in their class Aves, if we were going to put them into orders, falcons have their own order now called falconiforms, which is outside the rest of the groups we're going to talk about today. So I'd like to get to the falcons today, just kind of out of tradition. Traditionally, we've always called them raptors, so why not talk about them today? But they're really, biologically, maybe they belong, in a future lecture. Interestingly, if you go to South America, there's this thing that kind of looks more like a hawk. It's called the caracara. It's a falcon. So falcons vary, and this thing that kind of looks hawk-like is actually in that group as well, if you care. Okay. So falcons, they're not really raptors in the order. The name of the order that we give like hawks and eagles is accipitriforms. Falcons aren't in that. And then neither are the owls. I mean, they're closer than the falcons are in the family tree of birds. I hear a little tiny uh, okay, just I hear a little stuff in the background. So I was even thinking, I think the way that the day will work out, maybe owls are better for next week. Just I think, there are so many groups of birds, just how do we divide the material up evenly? So they're not related to hawks and eagles necessarily. And among the owls, it's interesting, all of the owls belong to one group, one family, except for this one, the barn owl. It's in its own separate group. So the owls of the world fall into two categories. Everybody, and then this one called the barn owl is in a family all its own. So we have two families of owls. One only has one species in it. So as we break groups up, we find that. I mean, you can have a group of birds that has hundreds of species, like the hummingbirds or the tanagers. And then you can have a group of birds which has one, the loon, or actually, I think there's two loons. We're a small group. So when we like say you're a family or even you're an order, that doesn't necessarily mean a lot of birds. It's just however many seem to be related in that group. So owls are not in the same group with everyone else. How about now vultures? All right, well, that's kind of tricky because I use the word vulture as if it's a thing. But actually, it's two things. There's old world vultures, like what you would like this. You don't find this around here. All right. So there are vultures that you would find in Africa, Asia, and Europe, what we call the old world vultures. They are accipitriforms, raptors in the eagle and hawk group. All right. But then we have the new world vultures. All right. These new world vultures, like the ones we have here, um, the turkey vulture, the black vulture, the condors, they are not close related to the old world vultures. So vulture is not a thing. The two groups of vultures really aren't related to each other. So who are these new world vultures related to? Well, when I was a real young kid, they were called raptors. Then for a really long time, like 10, 15 years, it was thought that they were related to storks because a bunch of weird things like how do they cool down? Both of the groups can defecate on their feet as a way of cooling down, like stuff like that. You're like, ooh, maybe that's a trait that's useful for putting things together. But now the DNA evidence comes back and says, no, they're not related to storks. So do we call them a subgroup of the raptor group or their own separate order? So people are going back and forth on that, and it could go either way. But see, this is good. This is frustrating as anything because, we want to learn the groups. All right, so why can't these scientists figure it out? But in a sense, this is what is good about science. All right, because a lot of fields, once something is, here's our conclusion, that's it. This is the way it is. Go teach this forever, and no one's ever going to change this. Science says, well, this is the decision, the conclusion we've made based on the evidence come to light now. But next year, there's going to be new studies. And then year after that, maybe new studies. And maybe that causes us to look at this in a different light or reorganize it. And it's annoying because I have to change my notes and my videos, et cetera. I mean, I hate that. But it's also how every year we get a little bit better at how we understand the natural world. Because this was an idea, but it turns out I don't think there's that much evidence for it. So that's what's frustrating. That's actually, a good thing about science as well. So New World vultures, which would include condors, California condor and the Andean condor, the black vulture and the turkey vulture, these yellow vultures from South America. And then the biggest flying birds ever. So condors once had big relatives, like condors can feed on, I don't know, like dead bison and the like. But, there used to be like mastodons and other elephants roaming. So these things in North America could have wingspans of 18 feet, and in South America, 26 feet, the largest flying birds ever. Things called teratorns. They were huge. All right. All right. So raptors have this one bird order here, plus falcons, which are a second. So I'm just going to mute. I heard a little background noise. Falcons are a separate group. Owls are a separate group. New World vultures may or may not be a separate group. But then everybody else, all right, they are in the group of Accipitriforms. So hawks, eagles, Old World vultures. This is a good group for them. The Accipitriforms there, you see a red-tailed hawk here. All right, so this is a bird order. See everybody in the pink? That's a group. But within that group, then we have two families that have one member only. So this is what's called a secretary bird, lives in Africa. It's in the hawk and eagle group, but it's the only member of its family. It's got really long legs, and that's interesting because some fossil raptors had really long legs too. I don't know what to make of that. So that's a member of the Accipitriform group. Then the osprey. This is in the hawk and eagle group, but it's the only member of its family. So it's a raptor, but a little less closely related to everybody else than what we saw before. And then we have the family Accipitridae, which now has the New World, I'm sorry, the Old World vultures, and then the hawks and the eagles. Now, I think I've said this before. All right, hawk, eagle, two different groups, right? No, because then you've got like goshawks and sharp-shinned hawks and Cooper's hawks. They're not closely related to red-tailed hawks. In fact, red-tailed hawks are more closely related to bald eagles than they are these little hawks. So hawks are not a group. It's not like, oh, all the hawks are related. No, these hawks are not that closely related to these hawks. And these eagles are not closely related to these eagles. So bald eagles and gold eagles are not close cousins. That bald eagles are more closely related to red-tailed hawk. Here's a golden eagle. So among the eagles, there are what are called the booted eagles that have feathers on their feet versus the sea eagles that eat a lot of fish and often have white on them, like the bald eagle. So here we have these birds of prey, and we'll go through them, but as we study them better, how we organize them into a family tree has changed a little bit. Now, I have some videos, I think I'm going to skip over these, where I go through each of the orders. And one of the things that's interesting as we go throughout the world, a lot of these have members which are in danger of extinction. So I'll point out like, oh, this one, has a species which only live, here, in this part of the world, like the Bermuda hawk went extinct because of habitat loss. This hawk is found only here and nowhere else in the world. So, a couple of things here, but we want to focus about on Orange County birds. Now, one of the things, I'm just going to begin with this, maybe you want to leave here with some clues on how to identify them, because we see them a lot, but sometimes we just see them for a split second as they fly over. So, how do we identify these birds of prey? Well, because they're hunting, a lot of times, I mean, these are bigger birds often, and they're going to stay in obvious places, like they're going to sit on a treetop and just sit there as they watch, which is different from so many of the little birds, which just never stop moving in the underbrush and are just impossible to see. These are really good if you're, just starting to get used to using binoculars or a spotting scope because they stay still. Like if you see a red-tailed hawk at the top of the tree, it's going to stay there for a while, right? And then you can, practice because we all get better with binoculars or spotting scopes over time. So I would recommend, look for a place we're going to see ducks and great blue herons or hawks because they'll sit still, right? Don't practice binoculars on like warblers, right? Because they don't stay still. They're tiny. Yeah, some of you are laughing like, you get a split second. So these are good for practice. Um, Owls, they have larger heads, disc-shaped faces. They come out at night, so they're very recognizable. It's easy to kind of to separate those. Um, Trying to get a rough idea of size is often helpful. Like with the songbirds, like everyone knows a robin. So use that. So you see a bird in the field. Was it robin size? Was it a little bigger? Was it a little smaller? You know what a sparrow looks like. So the bird you just saw, was it a little bigger, a little smaller? That can help you narrow out some of these groups. Red-tailed hawks, we see them all the time. So use that. Use that as your frame of reference. So who's bigger than a red-tailed hawk? Not many, not many. The vultures are, the osprey is, and the bald eagle is. All right, golden eagles do occur in our area, but they're hard to find. So I'll just skip them for now. You're not as likely to see those. The people who see them most likely are people who have farms with chickens, and then you don't want to see them. So we'll just stick with these guys for right now. And so if it looks bigger than a rail-tailed hawk, you're like, okay, I've narrowed it down. It's probably one of these three. Vultures you're most likely to see on carrion. We'll be talking about them later. Ospreys, these are fishing eagles. All right, so we're most likely to see them near water. All right, and then while I will make a big deal about the white bib on a red-tailed hawk, these ospreys, they have a whole lot of white on their belly and this nice brown stripe across their eyes. And when they fly, um, ospreys have this kink in their wrist typically. Like birds can sometimes hold their arms differently. So if you see something soaring above you, look to see is his wing straight out, in which case we're looking at a hawk or an eagle. Is it more of a V shape? In which case you say, oh, a V shape, I'm thinking vulture. Does it have kinks in the wings? Oh, I'm thinking osprey. Because sometimes the light isn't all that good, and you're just going to kind of see the outline and little hints like that. Could help you. Right? So things like that. These eagles, incredibly long wings. I mean, their wings can be 6, 7 feet, long in Alaska, even maybe 8. So that's huge. When we get to the hawks, as I start going through them, we say there are what are called buteo hawks because they have fan-shaped tails here, and their wings are broad. But then there's another group of smaller hawks that tend to have shorter wings and a longer tail, as opposed to, say, falcons, which have pointed wings and then a long, narrow tail. Right. And so as I go through, just that's one of our interests. And this frustrates me. I'm sure it frustrates you. But these little hawks, for example, these accipiter hawks, like I wish I had really good video on those. But yeah, I just see them for a second as they fly by or whatever. I'm reaching for the camera and just very often you just have a narrow window to identify them. So, first thing you do is like, what did the tail look like? How long were the wings? Because then you've narrowed, it's not all of the hawks of Orange County. Oh, it's a buteo hawk. So let me think, which of the buteos was it? It's an accipiter hawk. Which of the accipiters was it? Okay. If there's time at the end, I would love to go back over bald eagles because who doesn't love bald eagles? But we had a whole day just on them. So why don't I just skip them for now? And if there's time, I'd be more than happy to go back over them. So now let's start with ospreys. All right. So these are sometimes called fishing eagles, but once again, they're all alone in a family. So there's no other close relatives that they have on Earth. They're a little bit smaller than a bald eagle, and they've got that really nice big brown stripe going through their eye and a white chest. Immature bald eagles can have some white here, like a white stripe here, a white stripe here, and they like their head can be part white, part brown. So it is possible, like if you don't get a good look, to say, ugh, like what was it? Was it an immature bald or an osprey? But if you get a good look, just a white head with a strong brown stripe, um, is a telltale sign for an osprey. All right. So they occur in our area. So you'll see them at the Bashkill, along the Delaware. You can see them along big lakes, anywhere where you can find fish. If you go to the seashore, very often you'll see osprey nests up on posts, which are put there. So they like waterways. And so, you can see them in many places. One of the things, once again, to get back to their outline, you look at that picture, look at just like the bend there, look at that kink. That tells you it's an osprey. Because once again, you just see, is it bigger than a red-tailed hawk? All right, you say, all right, this thing's flying over it. Yeah, it looks bigger than a red-tailed hawk. But just look for that bend in the wing. You're like, aha, that's an osprey. Because sometimes you're not going to get the lighting on it. That you might otherwise do. All right, and once again, this is just the sunlight's on, and I can see how brown, how beautifully brown that is. But from farther away, that might be harder to see, and maybe you would confuse it with a bald eagle, like that one. So this, I happened to catch it. Unfortunately, this was my only picture. Um, Ospreys are smaller than bald eagles. And bald eagles watch the ospreys to see when they catch a fish. And if they can, they will try to take the fish from the osprey. So here's an osprey with a fish. Bald eagles, would try to capture that. Legend, I don't want to say legend has it. Um, Benjamin Franklin supposedly said some somewhat derogatory things about bald eagles, that they were a bird of bad. Oh, and I'm sorry, I have a Merlin in front of your face. Um, it was a bird of bad moral character because it can steal from other birds. You know, Benjamin Franklin, he that was like reported by, I think it was his son that said he said that. It was kind of in a thing where he was kind of poking fun at Thomas Jefferson, who belonged to an organization where they used an eagle on a crest. So we don't even know if he was talking about the real birds. And with Franklin, you could never know when he was serious anyway. But in any case, that is potentially where some of that comment came from. But these are truly great birds to watch. And if you're, fishing on a lake or on a Delaware or something, very often you can see these ospreys going past. So, that's one of our, our great birds here. Okay. Of the hawks, red-tailed hawks are our largest ones in North America. And if you see an adult and the sunlight is just right, you can't miss it. Look at the nice orange of that tail. Unfortunately, the sun often isn't, perfect for you. And the immatures don't necessarily have to have a red tail. They could just have a dull brown tail with some stripes. So, you know, that's a really distinctive feature that you can use for adult red-tailed hawks. But don't if you don't see it, don't say it absolutely wasn't a red-tailed hawk. The one thing that really works here is what's called the bib. So we have a red-tailed hawk here, but there is some like brown stripes here, but not on this white patch here. You got a big white patch on your chest called the bib, and the other hawks will have some brown striping there. So you see something in a tree. So that's the one thing. Like how big is it? Like, is it bigger than a red tail? In which case, I'm thinking maybe immature bald eagle. But if it's red-tailed hawk size, do I see a bib? All right. And things like this is just birding tips, because you never know if you only have like 2 seconds to note it before something flies away. So just when you ask a question, make sure they're the right question. So like for each group of birds, like I'm looking for this, and with the hawks looking for that white bib there. Notice this adult has brown eyes. And I say that because somewhere here, immatures will have yellow eyes and won't really have the auburn tail yet. And so, this is the time of year where the immatures which hatch this year still might not look like the adults that they will. But this is where you're likely to see them on telephone lines, on the tops of trees as you drive past. If you drive on 84, you'll see them. I mean, just they're always there. Like, probably you should probably be the one in the passenger seat rather than looking. But I'm sure all the birders in this room, just as I have had close calls where you're like, what bird is that? Like, just I should be paying attention to my driving. So it's a problem, and we should always try to be careful of that. But what they're doing is they're eating rodents primarily, and they're waiting for the big trucks going by to scare the rodents, and all of a sudden the rodent like rustles out of the bushes where it is, and then they'll just come right down on the road and eat it. So they love sitting near roads, because the traffic is doing their job. Golden eagles are famous for riding on trains. For the same reason that you're out west, you're going through the prairie, you're riding on a train, and all these jackrabbits get scared up. The golden eagle's already flying, like, moving like what, 80 miles an hour on a train, just like jumps off and just has to glide down and catch its thing. So, they have this, symbiotic relationship going with humans, which are scaring up with their prey. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking about the aquatic birds, like the ducks, and they shed their feathers all at once. So there's a time where when they molt all their feathers at once, they can't fly. Most birds don't do that. And here you can see a red-tailed hawk. So I was talking there, but like, look at its feathers. Like you might think like, ooh, is it sick? What's going on? And the answer is no. It's going to molt its feathers every year because they get old. They might get ratty and not be as good for flying. So you shed them and you get new ones. But notice that they're coming in gradually. Like here's a new one, etc. So there is no period where a red-tailed hawk can't fly, unlike the duck. So this is typical of birds, and I just thought this was a good example. Yes.
Uh, is there an evolutionary reason of why the bird that sheds all of its feathers on the same time?
That's a great question. Because they're water birds, they can get by with not flying better than most birds could because they can just swim and look for this. And they're also doing it at the time when the eggs hatch. So at the eggs hatch, if you were a goose or a swan, both males and females are caring for the young. If you're a duck, most of the time it's just the females and the males are all hanging out with the other males. But at that time, maybe flying wouldn't be all that important because the parents aren't going to fly away from a predator, but because they would be leaving their ducklings behind. So those are, I think, reasons that it's more tolerated among the ducks than other birds. Good question. Here are some red-tailed hawks on a nest. And this was just south of Orange County and the Croton Eagle Fest here. Both males and females help construct the nest. This is nowhere near as big as the nest you'll see in bald eagles, which are the largest nests in the bird world, but still pretty big. All right, so they can be 6 feet in height and over 3 feet in diameter. So, that's pretty big. And here you can see that while one is on the nest, the other one is helping to bring food there. So they can both parents are helping to care for the young there. Raptors, and I should have said this earlier and I'll say it again. In raptors, females are larger than males. And so very often the female's at the nest, but like, if there comes a point where she doesn't want the male there, like she scares him off. I mean, he listens to her. And among bald eagles, there's a point where now the young that hatched that year are bigger than the male. So the male, when it catches fish, kind of like comes in the nest, dumps it and flies away because he's not wanted there and everyone else is bigger than he is. So in the raptors, the male is smaller. So let's say you saw this Argentine. Yes, it was. So I just see a little a note here. So your note, TJ, says New World vultures are related to egrets and cranes. Let me be honest. 20 years ago, someone would have said that's not true. 10 years ago, people would have said that's exactly true. Today, they would say again, that's not true. So as we start to compare these, it's frustrating, all right, because there's new studies which are published and the new data suggests that we have to modify this a little bit. So I can, because I've taught all three of those at different points of my teaching career. And so TJ, you have a very good source, but it's probably more than 5 years old. And if you found one a little more recent, it would probably say something different. So here's a hawk. If you look at it, you might say, oh, it's about the size of a red tail, maybe a little smaller. Okay, but about the same size. Ooh, but notice there's no bib there. All right, notice that there's streaking here and not a big patch of white. So that's not a red-tailed hawk, that's a red-shouldered hawk for a little auburn on its shoulder. They sound a little different. And so that's another thing. Oh, and I think I said this once. Um, I'm not trying to play a gotcha question, but if I were to ask you, do you know what a bald eagle sounds like? A lot of you would say yes, and I say no, you don't. You know what a
It's like a
red-tailed hawk?
seagull.
Yeah, okay, very good, very good. It is very good. It is like a seagull, very good. Most people say, yeah, it goes like a screech. You're like, no, that's a red-tailed hawk. Somewhere back in the day, in the old Western movies, someone said, all right, this is what bald eagles sound like. No, I don't like that. Red-tailed hawks. That's a good sound. Let's just dub that in. So there are so many places where when you hear a bald eagle, it is not a bald eagle. It is a red-tailed hawk. So just so you know. The different types of hawks and eagles, they do make different sounds. And you could say, oh, okay, that sounds like a red-shouldered, a broad-winged. I For my class, I have this here. I'm sure you can get this online. Just I was having trouble in previous weeks with like who could hear what, so I was going to maybe try some of that at the end of the class. I actually have with a lot of my videos. So your question was, the bald eagle. Somewhere here I have like bald eagles and their call, so you can and tell you what, how about I'll just stick with this and then we'll try to find that. At the 6.5 station sanctuary right up the road near Goshen, one of the things I got to photograph this year is so this is a red-shouldered hawk, and you can kind of make out a little more auburn on the wings there. Well, very often little birds will go after that, and a lot of them, like a lot of the flycatchers do. These are red winged blackbirds. They'll go after bald eagles. They'll go after ospreys. So that's a big bird. There's a little tiny bird that's chasing it away. So really gutsy on the little bird's point of view. Could the eagle go after the little bird? They could. If you're small, you're probably a bit more maneuverable than the big eagle that's used to more gliding, etc. So here's an osprey and the same thing. But then for the big bird, is it really worth the energy expenditure? Like at the end of the day, if you're an animal, you want more energy coming in than you expended. And if there's this little bird that's harassing you, then just maybe I'm going to go somewhere else. It's just not worth the trouble. And so here's a red-shouldered hawk being chased away by some of the red-winged blackbirds. Notice the red-shouldered hawk seems to have something in its talons. It kind of looks like a snail to me. All right, but look at they're like going after the bird where it's like these big air maneuvers.
Why is the depth of the red-shouldered hawk?
That's a great question. I don't know. I think it's a molting thing. So once again, you wouldn't molt all your feathers all at once. So another option is if little birds are going after it, like did they strafe it or something? I don't think that's possible, but I don't think so. I think it just it's molting in its flight feathers, and you would only want to do a couple at a time. Notice on the red-shouldered hawks, when they fly over, you'll see a lot of little stripes. All right, so red-tailed hawks, a big auburn tail that's solid, but these red-shouldered hawks, I'm sure I'll get another image here, you'll see a series of a smaller black and white stripes as they go over. And if not, then we'll go to here. All right, so red-tailed hawks, if the sunlight's right, you can get the auburn, but trust me, the sun isn't always right. Now, I say like buteo hawks, I'll get to that, that's an immature, hold their tails out like this is a buteo. All right, but like there's no rules. Like if a bird, for whatever maneuver it wants to do, wants to fold its wings, its tail a little bit. So when I say like look for this or look for that, just please be aware that birds haven't said, well, the birder said, 100% like I'm supposed to act like this and my other hawk acts the other way. They do whatever they want. So most of the time its tail feathers are going to be out, but depending on how it's trying to fly, it could go in a little bit. Notice that doesn't look like a red-tailed hawk. That's an immature. So there's a red-tailed hawk. See the bib? You're like, oh, there's the bib. But immatures will take a little while before they look like the adults do. So here are some images of red-tailed hawks. Okay, very often along power lines, so anyway, just beautiful. This is one of those raptor rehabilitators who, they'll very often get ones which aren't able to go back into the wild. Here's red-shouldered hawks. You can see a little more auburn in their shoulder area, more striping here. And like if you look there, very narrow black and white stripes on the tail. So that's, like you see it going overhead and you're like, oh, I see the stripes, red-shouldered hawk. That would be good. Because there's another hawk, a little smaller, that doesn't have lots of narrow stripes, but has a big white stripe. So this would be a broad-winged hawk. So once again, you might only get a split second to identify some of these. So, red-tailed hawks I know. So what I'm looking at size-wise, big, small. The tail, is it fan-shaped? Is it narrow? Am I seeing stripes on the tail? Am I seeing red? If you have 5 seconds before this thing flies overhead, those are the little things to try to key in on. This is more migratory. So here, here's a size thing. So they look different, but I used I went and they took out some of their birds so I could take up closer pictures. And I tried to arrange all my pictures so the hands are the same size. So just to show you that size can help you in the field of identify. Red-tailed hawks, they're big. Broad-wing hawks, they're smaller. All right, so if you have an idea, like I'm looking at a hawk, but it just to me looks smaller than that's where here's a kestrel, which would be smaller still. A red-tailed hawk is going to stay in our area over winter, potentially. We'll see them all winter. Broadwings, they're mostly gone. They migrate in huge numbers. If you get a good day, I've heard you can see them in like hundreds, if not thousands, along migratory routes. I've never seen that, but they're just, they migrate in groups. So hawks are different in that way. Now, this is one of my favorites. And there's 2 different colors. As you can see here, that looks like 2 different hawks. That's 2 different colors. Here's another big hawk. Oh, I apologize. I skipped a video. So here's some of the broadwing hawk. Once again, notice no bib. So it's a little smaller than others, but no bib there. And as a result, they feed on different things. So, red-tailed hawk going to eat a lot of rodents. Once we start getting smaller, more, snakes are more common, big insects are more common, etc. Okay. So this can look a little bit like a bib, but this is solid. Whereas like a red-tailed hawk, if you notice, it's not like a solid dark band it's here. This I love because this is a hard hawk to see. It's called a rough-legged hawk. But the reason it's mostly hard to see is because you have to go out in winter and it has to be cold. All right, because if it's a warm winter, then maybe they say not only is it warm here, it's warm in Canada. And they're like, maybe I don't have to migrate south. It's, the winter isn't so bad. Maybe I won't go to Orange County, for winter. Maybe I'll stay where I am as long as I can. So every time of the year is a good time of the year to go birding. And there are things that you can see in winter that you can't see at any other time of the year. Rough-legged hawks would be one of the examples. So broad-winged hawks, they're gone. You have to see them here in warmer months. But rough-legged hawks, you'd only see them here in colder months. All right, so that's another neat thing. When you look at the field guide, you say like, oh, there's always all these hawks. But if it's winter, red-tailed hawks and rough-legged hawks and anything else is unusual. Whereas in summer you won't see those, little tricks like that. And you don't have to distinguish between all of those. You can rule some of them out. If you wanted to go down to the Pine Island area, the Liberty Loop area, where the Winding Waters Trail is, that is the best place to see these rough-legged hawks. Little things, what I'm about to say is kind of a tiny bit more advanced. But first, when they fly, one thing they often have, once again, there can be these 2 color morphs. There can be a dark morph, so that makes it difficult. But you see that dark patch here? That's something that very often these rough-legged hawks have. So if you see like dark spots underneath the wings, you can say like, ooh, that's neat. Plus, they can hover. So this is something, maybe not for a beginner birder. But it's not just what they look like, it's how they act. See, this bird's just going to like hover in one area and just stay there. Hawks usually don't do that. All right, so rough-legged hawks would be unusual, like falcons can. We'll see falcons doing that in a second. But if you just see a hawk that's about the size of a red tail, just staying in one place, it's not a red tail. You might say, oh, that's a rough-legged hawk. Just sometimes, rather than just use your visual cues, just how is the bird behaving? That might help you out as well. Okay, so let's migrate now to the smaller hawks. Which have longer tails. They tend to fly with shorter wings and longer tails. They're called the accipiters. Of these, the largest in our area is called the goshawk. Goshawks are, I guess, most famous, or at least I think, because there's stories where if you like climb a tree to go after their nest, they'll come after you, which, good. Like, probably you shouldn't be going climbing up the tree. Yeah, don't do that. But they're known to be aggressive in the defense of their nest. Even their little cousins, which are the size of blue jays. I happened to get next. I was just walking on a trail, and there was a nest in one of the trees, and it like was swooping over me and like would like briefly come at me, and I'm like, oh, like so like I got out of there as quickly as I could. So these accipiters are known to be a little more aggressive here. This is a trail cam caught this at near Warwick. So goshawks are hard to see. So I'm really happy that we got, this was from this summer when it was so hot and dry, that this goshawk clearly enjoying the the relaxing that it can do here. And these accipiter hawks, they often feed on birds. So the next one is called a Cooper's hawk. If you've ever heard the term chicken hawk, that's mostly referring to the accipiters. Chicken hawk is kind of a common name. So, when people use the term chicken hawk, what are they referring to? Well, a common name, there's no rules. I mean, so someone can use for chicken hawk for lots of things. But they're usually talking about this group. The name of this one called goshawk is derived from goose hawk, just to kind of give you the idea that, very often they're going to prey on birds. So, this is not an easy bird to see. So I was really happy that our trail cam got that. This is a more typical one. I'm sure you've seen this fly overhead, but just you get brief glimpses of that. They tend not to sit in a tree the way a red-tailed would. But look how long the legs are. They're just built a little bit different than red-tailed hawks. And as I had mentioned, among the hawks, a red-tailed hawk, at least genetically, seems to be more closely related to a bald eagle than these accipiter hawks. Just because we call them hawks don't necessarily mean that they're a whole lot alike. So in the food that they like, their body build, you can see some differences. So this is a Cooper's hawk. Once again, the term chicken hawk probably is used to describe them more so than most. Now, one of my favorites, just because these are easier to see, is the northern harrier hawk in this group. You won't see them if you're not in the right habitat. But if you're in the right habitat, like once again, the Liberty Loop, in Pine Island area, such a great area to go birding all year round. I'll be leading a bird hike there tomorrow at 5 p.m. Anyone is welcome. So there's a parking area along it's called County Line Road or Oil City Road. It goes by both names. We'll be leaving there at 5. But it's such a beautiful place there. These harrier hawks, they hunt by just flying over the marshland and looking for rodents. Here, you probably recognize that building, many of you, as the one that just got put up in Goshen this year. Here's one flying over the 6.5 station sanctuary here in Goshen. They have almost an owl-like face, all right, which makes them just kind of like a distinctive look as the hawks go. But as you can fly see them very often, there's that white spot right over their tail feathers, which helps you distinguish them. But they're often going slow, and if you're walking along the Liberty Loop Trail, you can just see them just gliding over the marsh looking for rodents. They give you time to train your binoculars on them, etc. So this is one I like a great deal, and they'll stay with us all winter. All right, and so if you're thinking, oh, I'd like to do some good birding on a cold winter day, you can still go to the Liberty Loop and you can find them there. Let me just throw out a couple of more pictures of Harrier hawks. So you see them flying low to the ground. Here, that nice white spot is easy to strike from afar. All right. Notice they do kind of look a little bit different with their more owl-shaped heads. If the light's just right, catches
What
a
did you have
really
to
nice reddish orangey color to them. So, I'm sorry, is someone asking a question? Or is that just background?
You never answered it.
Okay, if it's a background, I'll just. Just a beautiful, beautiful bird and a fairly easy one to see. So I mentioned the goshawk there. Okay. All right. Well, as we go through our groups of raptors, I didn't think we'd have enough time to get to all of them. So I thought, we'll shoot for at least the vultures and the falcons today, and then maybe do owls next time. That's kind of the way I thought that it would go. So let's just talk about these. All right. So I had some videos that I wanted to show you. This one I shot last week. So I was just driving to Goshen, and right on 17M, there was a deer that got hit. And one of the things, this might help you with birding if you have a place you can pull over to the side of the road. A lot of the birds, they get accustomed to cars. We're like, oh, I don't know what these big boxes are, but they're not a threat. But when they see a person, they'll react and they'll fly away. But like, so these vultures were on a carcass, but because I pulled up in my car and didn't get out of it, they kind of like tolerated me. Let me take some pictures and some videos, which you're going to see here. So, just, an idea if you ever see that, sometimes that works out. Like I know if you go to some of the winter eagle places like Forestburg and the Rio Dam, if you stay in your car, a lot of times the eagle's, in the tree and it just ignores you because you're a car, you're not but if you got out as a person, they might fly away. So little hints here. Here you can clearly see we have two vultures in our area. The one that's always been here, slightly larger with the reddish head, the turkey vulture, but then the smaller black vulture here. Black vultures, when I was a kid, this wasn't the area for them. But as our climate warms, we're seeing changes. Like there are birds that this really wasn't the part of the world you'd find them. But black vultures are here to stay now. Red-bellied woodpeckers are here to stay. Now, if you're a gardener, if you've got old gardening books, that are like a couple decades old about like what zone we're in and what you can plant here, throw them away because we're in a different zone now. I'm sure a lot of you know that. Like you can plant all kinds of plants here that you couldn't have planted 30 years ago because it's warmer. The winters aren't as cold, et cetera. So, we're seeing it affect our planting. We're seeing it affect the birds that we see. So black vultures, they're kind of new. Here you can see two black vultures up close. Black vultures often associate with turkey vultures because old world vultures, they depend on vision and they can't smell. Turkey vultures can smell as well, so they can, smell carrion. Black vultures can't smell. So black vultures watch for where the turkey vultures are going. All right, and if they see a whole bunch of turkey vultures going this way, the black vultures think, oh, they must see something, they must smell something good, so they follow them to a kill. Yes?
How much relation to evolution, in the evolutionary chain, does the black vulture and the turkey vulture have to active turkeys?
Close to zero. So turkeys will be the thing. If you look at the bird family tree, so let me just describe it. I have videos on it, but it would probably take more time to find it than. So the bird family tree of the birds alive today, what does it look like? First branch that comes off has like the ostrich and the rhea and the big flightless birds and a few flying birds in South America. That's the first branch off. The second branch off is the ducks and the chickens and the turkeys. All right. So everything that's not like an ostrich or a duck or a chicken or a turkey, everyone else is more closely related to each other because turkeys, they're just an early branch off the tree that leads to the rest of them. So they just happen to have red heads that kind of remind people of turkeys. They're not closely related. Question. So let me just say some words in defense of turkeys. I'm sorry, turkeys next week. I'm sorry. Turkey vultures. They eat meat, but they almost never kill. All right. So they're obligate scavengers. A lot of birds scavenge sometimes. Bald eagles, especially when they're young, they scavenge sometimes. Blue jays do, crows do. But turkey vultures have to. There's no way they are getting through a day unless they're eating dead meat. They're not good at hunting. Their feet aren't strong. They can't, like, they don't have like talons and the ability to kill things with their claws. Now, if something's dying, they might kill it. So, like, they can eat dead things. Dying things, also potentially. But apart from that, they almost never kill, but they live, primarily on um, on meat. And I'm glad that they do. All right. Because if vultures weren't here to eat that dead deer, what would happen? Well, it would rot and there would be more microbes. And among the microbes that would love to just grow in a rotting deer carcass would be ones that would include like hoof and mouth disease, mad cow disease, rabies, bubonic plague, etc. The more corpses you have around, the more microbes you're exposed to. But then plus there would be other scavengers would be attracted, like rats and feral dogs would now thrive because now they would have food. And things like rats can carry a whole bunch of diseases. So they're not only recycling nutrients in the ecosystem, but they're cleaning it. All right. Our world would be dirtier and more infectious if it wasn't for them. So, kudos to them, eating meat without killing and, cleaning an environment in the process. Now, it's not a pleasant way to eat, as I'm sure we can all agree. So there are some adaptations there. It has no feathers on its head because who would want that? Who would want to be sticking your head into rotting flesh if you've got, all of these head feathers? They would just, get all of this dunk on them that would increase your risk of infection. So not having head feathers is an advantage. They have other things like their feathers are different. They don't trap as much moisture, so it's harder for like microbes to colonize their skin. Their stomachs are really acidic, much more acidic than most. And so they're eating a lot of bacteria, but their really acidic stomachs are now more likely to kill the bacteria as well. So they've got adaptations for this unique lifestyle that they have. And once again, they tend to stay still. Like if you could just drive up slowly or whatever. So here's a turkey vulture on a carcass. Really do have attractive heads if you catch them in the right light. And because their wingspans can be 6 feet long, they really do take advantage of those thermals that I mentioned with the eagles the other day. So if you were going to flap these 6 foot long wings, that would be tough. All right. But if instead there are these rising air currents where you just kind of glide along, slowly go up, and then you could glide down over, a mile or so and barely flap your wings at all. So birds which are soaring are only using a little more energy than they would if they were just sitting still. And so at this time of year, you can see a lot of these because turkey vultures won't spend the winter here. They're all going south. And so on a day where there's nice thermals, like especially if it was cold yesterday and it's warmer today, you'll just see lots of these big birds gliding south. Yes.
Do you know, it seems like turkey vultures and black vultures have like much bigger wings proportionally and physically than other birds. Why is that?
So that they can take advantage of this because the way that they hunt, they're going to try to scan a big area for like a big dead animal, like a deer or something. So they would like to be aloft for a long time. So with these big wings that they can kind of soar better than a red-tailed hawk would. A red-tailed hawk would have to flap more than they. Good question. So it's a good time of the year to see turkey vultures as they glide south. And the black vultures, they're a little smaller if you wanted to try to distinguish between them. And they tend to have a little white under their wings. So if you can see their heads, or you can say, oh, they don't have the turkey colored heads. But if you wanted to look at them from underneath, very often you can distinguish them as well. So once again, I kind of like, the reddish head here. Here you can see a turkey vulture in flight. Very often you see like the dark where its arms are and the feathers look lighter. So once again, kind of like dark where the arms are, feathers lighter. And if you were to look at a black vulture, the wings are often a little shorter, but a little white on the wingtips. Makes them look a little bit different. Then the last group I'd like to just quickly mention are the falcons. All right, so falcons are fast. All right, they're fast because they have these pointed, narrow wings, and we have three. The one that you're most likely to see is the kestrel. It is the smallest of them, as you can see here. All right, beautiful coloration on the kestrel. Nice face stripe there that helps take the sun out of its eyes. Ah, I'm sorry.
How does the stripe in their eye?
Well, uh, I'm going to. All right, I'm gonna say something. But if anyone wants to say, all right, you're not wrong, but I know more about football than you do. Feel free to, correct the guitar playing bird watcher if you have football experience. But if you ever watch like baseball or football players, often if they're in the sun, they'll put like a little black, just to kind of, absorb some of the sunlight so it's not bouncing like off, here and confounding the vision. So, sports players will sometimes do that. So, these birds do something similar. Um, Here is another thing the kestrels do is they'll sometimes hover as they look for prey. So you'll see that coming up in a second. See how it just it was somewhere. I think I have a better video coming up where it'll just kind of hover in place right there, and then it'll just kind of look and go down. Most birds don't do that. Certainly, birds not that big. Hummingbirds can, all right, but that's unusual. All right, that a bird just hovers there. And so if you see that, you might be thinking, oh, I think that's a kestrel. Now, kestrels are small, and males are smaller than females. So if you ask, like, what are they eating? Now, we're not looking more like it's snakes and amphibians, but like male kestrels, like grasshoppers. All right, so like insect eating is a big thing, because these are smaller and smaller birds. If we go up, oh yeah, okay, I'm sorry. The next in size is a merlin. All right, so here is a merlin, a slightly larger falcon. Just about a month ago, one was flying past 6.5 station. They don't spend their summers here, but migration season, you're going to see a whole lot of things going in this area. So it looks like a falcon, but it's bigger than a kestrel. Here's once again where if you have size, possibilities. It's a falcon, and we only have three. One's little, one's big. This one's in the middle. I think that's the merlin, especially if it's the right time of year, like a migration route. There was one year where on Horton Hall, a merlin just landed and just stayed there for like an hour. It was just such a beautiful place to see this pretty bird. The largest of our falcons is the peregrine falcon, which we should say is probably the fastest bird in the world. Now, by saying fast, I do have to do a caveat because some birds are fast at flying in a straight line. What falcons will do is they'll hunt from above. You saw the kestrel doing it. But this peregrine falcon wants to eat birds like ducks. And so what it wants to do is fly very high to the point where the ducks wouldn't even notice there. But then if a duck is flying over a body of water, like a body of water, there's no place to hide. And the falcon is up there. All of a sudden, it'll like quick tuck in its wings and then just dive. Well over 200 miles an hour. Some have said up to 260. And we could argue about that or not, but certainly over 200 miles an hour. And so when this bird hits a duck, even though the duck is bigger and heavier at that speed, the duck just kind of like explodes in a bowl of feathers, and this is how it catches its prey. Now, when I was younger, there were essentially no bald eagles east of the Mississippi River nesting. Same with peregrines, that our use of the pesticides like DDT had wiped out most of them. In the 80s, we went to visit a friend of mine up in Vermont. They were actually releasing peregrine falcons into the wild. So it's neat that I can like remember when that attempt to reintroduce them in the wild, it's been that recent. But you can see these now, peregrines are around here. And also they don't mind people as much because in their natural environment, they like these big places where they can dive. They like cliff faces. And humans have done them some favors in a way, in that we have skyscrapers and we have bridges. And they say this is kind of like a big metal cliff. I knew a bird watcher once, her husband went to I think it was, I'm from Philly, so it was a Phillies baseball game, and she really wasn't into the game. But she brought her binoculars, and so he's watching the baseball game, and she's watching peregrine falcons go after the pigeons in the stadium. And so she had a great time. So this is our largest falcon here. One last thing before I start to uh, tie up. Is uh, nature doesn't always like the categories that we put it in. All right, and we say you're a mallard duck, you're a black duck, separate species. But male mallards, they try to mate with pretty much anything. And then there are times where you see there's a duck that what kind of species is it? It's a hybrid. All right, it's got two different species as a parent, and you say that shouldn't be because you're different species. You shouldn't reproduce, but nature is what nature is. And so here's a hybrid falcon, a cross between a peregrine falcon and a gyrfalcon. Once again, we consider them different species because this is rare, right? But nevertheless, it can happen. And this pops up like, so when we mention warblers in a couple of weeks, we are losing our golden wing warblers because blue wing warblers are becoming more common in this area and they interbreed. And so there's fewer and fewer of the purebred golden wing warblers. So hybridization certainly occurs in nature. And, sometimes there's actually, concern about, a species declining or so after a certain point, I like to have like an organization. Like, let's talk about ducks, and they're all in the group. But some of these weeks are just going to be like, I'm just going to start talking about birds until time runs out. Because after a while, it's almost arbitrary. Like, who do we include in today's lecture versus next lecture? Once, like, if they're not forming these real biological groups, it doesn't matter. We just talk about ones as we could. So I hit most of what were traditionally called the raptors other than the owls. All right, so we used to put falcons, vultures, hawks, and eagles all in a group. Now we think that falcons are actually more closely related to songbirds, New World vultures. Maybe they're a sister group to the other order. Owls are certainly in a different group, but nevertheless, they do share some features. These big birds that are, eating larger animals, often sitting still in trees. And if you go to a raptor show, just, a true joy to get close to these animals. You'll see all of these together. So it's fall, and a lot of these are flying south. And if you just look up on a day and it's on a thermals, you'll see a bunch of things soaring over your head. Sometimes check it out because I say, just a bunch of vultures, bunch of vultures. But the other, about like 3 weeks ago, I looked close and I'm, oh, that's an immature bald eagle. So, sometimes there's an unusual um, one that you didn't expect to see, like the merlin that went through, near Goshen. That's an unusual bird, but it is the season for migration. They do have to go through our area to get farther south. So I wish you luck if you go out birding in some of our great Orange County habitats, and good luck with the things that you see. Next week, the goal is to talk about everything that's not a songbird that we haven't mentioned yet. So that would be owls, woodpeckers, hummingbirds, and then a couple of, odds and ends we're cleaning up that would be like kingfisher, doves, and I just had them, swifts and things like that. So that would be next week's. Thank you so very much for coming. Oh, thank you so very much. Yes, because of the national holiday and because the college is closed. Next week is the only week that it will not be on a Monday, that it will be on Tuesday instead, same time, same place. I am recording all of these and they are available. They're in a playlist. So if anyone, if that's not convenient, you work on
What
Tuesdays or
national
whatever.
holiday?
So Columbus Day / Native Americans Day is next Monday.
Oh, why not do it for Tuesday? That'd be better. That'd make better
Okay,
sense.
that's great. That's great. Um, and so if anyone has any questions, I'll hang out. But thank you so very much for coming.
I have a question.
Oh, yeah, okay, tell you what, I'm sorry. Someone's asking a question here, and then I'll get to you, TJ.
Okay.
Oh, really? Oh, that's great. So for those of you at home, the Hudson Valley Hudson Highlands Nature Center has two owls. So if you get a chance, two. I'm sorry, one barred owl, one red-tailed hawk. So if you want to stop by and visit, that sounds like a great day. Yeah.
They
So
also have a crow that talks.
Oh, and a crow that talks. Thank you,
Yeah.
Barbara. He says hello. Well, that's
He
it's better than
does.
I manage on some days, so that's good. TJ, you had a question.
Yeah. Does it relate to the whole scavengers thing? I know most primates were scavengers, including our ape ancestor Australopithecus. Is that
Uh-huh.
true? Like, are primates today, including lesser extent some humans, are primates?
So, given the fossils that we have, it is kind of difficult to look at ancient fossil sites like Australopithecines and say, were they hunting? Were they scavenging? So you could look at like how the things seem to be killed, etc. Like, for example, the early Homo erectus seems to have hunted more like big, slow things like crocodiles and didn't get good at hunting mammals until later, like they got better at hunting over time. So I'm sure that they did some scavenging, but to what degree, just given the fossils we have, I think that's a difficult thing. So we can make estimates and hypotheses, but as far as like speaking with authority, I'm not sure we're really good on that. Anybody else? Another question? Yes.
I heard the expression a Cooper's hawk.
Yes.
What is that?
So in the accipiter hawks, the ones which have the long tails and the long legs, this is a Cooper's hawk. And I apologize, you're just making me angry. I have seen so many accipiter hawks, but it's like, there's one, I don't have good video of an accipiter. By the time the camera comes out, it's flown away. So like the beauty is they tend to sit still, and the accipiters, they tend not to. So I apologize. This was at a raptor rehabilitation center that I got this video. I hopefully in the future will have far better videos of accipiter hawks than I have at this moment. So sorry about that.
So,
Anybody?
Walter, I have a
Yes.
little story about a sharp-shinned hawk. People
Okay, so
wonder-
I'll when you're finished your story, I'll say it to the group because I don't know if they can hear you. This is a story about a sharp-shinned hawk, which is a blue jay sized cousin of this one. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I was up on Hook Mountain, and it was very, very cloudy and foggy, and you couldn't see anything. But the sharpshins, all the accipiters, they fly right through it.
Yeah.
So I yelled out to somebody, "There's one," and he attacked me. He came down to my feet, went up my body and over my head, and I just froze. And that's
Wow.
what the little bird feels like when he's coming at them.
Well, so she says that once she said she was out birding and she yelled, I see one, and the bird attacked her, came at her feet and like went up her body. And like the sharp-shinned hawk, that's the one where I was walking on a trail and there was a nearby nest, and it was like swooping really low, and then like it turned like to come right at me. But they're defending their territory like goshawks. You don't go near a goshawk's nest because you're in a tree and they'll come after you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Barbara. That's a great story.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. We'll see you next week.
Okay.
Yes.
Why are vultures like dark brown, like almost black? Is the coloration like, does it help them absorb like sunlight?
Well,
Help
one of the things that we can see with vultures is very often in the early morning, they'll like spread their wings to give a big surface area so that they can warm up. So I think that the dark color must help them with that. Okay. Well, thank you so very much. Forgive me, I have one student who has a question here, so I'm going to kind of switch gears because I know online I also have two students in this class who might have the same question. So I'm just going to kind of address a question for a second. So if you have questions about things or would like to see something, in the announcements are videos. So you could click on that and watch a video where I'm saying, ooh, here's the folder where you go, etc. I'll show you now, but I'm just saying that this would be, a thorough version if you want.
Oh,
So
okay.
when you go to the content section, we've had a number of topics, and each topic has, some question sets where you can like identify stuff. So for example, on this week's The Raptors, all right, so there was, some, questions here on eagles and ospreys, hawks, vultures and falcons. Here's something for you to think about. And then here are some pictures that you might see on the midterm. So the midterm is here. And there's different sections from week 1, from week 2, from week 3, from week 4, from week 5. You can take all of these. Actually, I don't have to still record this.